Executive Committee to order for Friday, May 11th, 2018. Thank you all for being here. We'll go for item number 1, which is the approval of the meeting minutes for April 13th.
Move approval. Second.
There's a motion, and Mr. Minto seconds. Mr. Voss, motion. Any further discussion? Voting members, if you could use your secret voting machines.
What makes it secret?
I didn't realize we were voting like this in here.
Oh, no.
South County, we don't have South County. We do. Ron's on this.
The alternates.
Okay, Serge.
Come on, Serge.
You gotta stand up. There you go.
South County doesn't
Voting is
count.
closed,
You don't get a vote. We have a wall
and we
there.
are approved. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is public comments and communications. We don't have any speaker slips or anybody wanting to speak, I don't believe, so we'll move on to item number 3 on the consent calendar. This is the Service Bureau report that we receive on a regular basis, and we had a positive budget and positive results. Anybody would like to hear that, or can we have a motion for approval? Information. Okay. Don't need a motion on that. We'll move to item number 4, review of the draft board agendas with Victoria. Good morning.
Good morning. So item number 4A is the draft board agenda for May 25th for the business meeting. Item number 1 is approval of the meeting minutes. 2 is public comments. 3 is actions from policy advisory committees. Under your consent calendar, item number 4 is your standing approval of proposed solicitations and contracts. At this time, we do not have any, so we expect to remove this item from the agenda. Item number 5 is a memorandum of agreement with the City of San Diego. The city is requesting to use up to $40 million in commercial paper. Item number 6 is the Transnet Smart Growth Incentive Program funding recommendations for the climate action plans and the complete streets policy. We received 1 application from the City of El Cajon for their climate action plan, so we're requesting that the board approve this item. Item number 7 is the FY18 Transportation Development Act Productivity Improvement Recommendation. This is an annual report be coming up from the Transportation Committee to the board seeking approval. Item number 8 is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Triennial Goals. We'll be asking the board to accept the DBE goal methodologies. Item number 9 and 10 are your standing report on meetings and events attended on behalf of SANDAG, followed by the report summarizing delegated actions taken by the executive director. Item number 11 is the FY19 weighted vote formula. So this is based on the Department of Finance figures that will go into effect on July 1. So we'll provide an information update. Item number 12 is the overview of developments in the financial markets and quarterly finance report, followed by item number 13, which is the quarterly progress report on transportation projects. Under the reports, we have a hearing of necessity. This is in relation to the Midcoast corridor project and the Costa Verde Hotel. Item number 15 is the Midcoast Trolley Pepper Canyon Sequa addendum. We're looking for an approval from that. This is coming up from the Transportation Committee to the board. Number 16 is the proposed final FY19 program budget. This is on your agenda today, so we'll be coming from a recommendation from this committee to the board. We're seeking to adopt it. Item number 17 is the regional growth forecast assumptions. So we're seeking an approval. This will be coming up from regional planning. Item number 18 is a downtown stopover and multi-use facility. We're requesting to move this actually to the June business meeting. Item number 19 is the San Diego Forward, the regional plan development of the transportation networks. This will be provided for you for information and give you some insight into the process that will be used to create the network scenarios. Item number 20 is the project cost estimates, and this is for discussion. This is coming up from I believe the Transportation Committee heard this report, and so now we'll be presenting this to the board. Item number 21, Mr. Stuyvesant has, from Navy Region Southwest, has requested to present an item before the board related to the Intergovernmental Service Agreement Forum. And then we have 2 closed session items. 1 related to the Sandag lease with the Irvine Company, and item number 23, which is also related to the Midcoast project.
Are there any questions
And then-
regarding this agenda? Oh, one more?
And one more, and then pending discussion at today's closed session meeting related to the executive director recruitment, we may add an item under the chair's report to continue that discussion. The chair's report.
This is a very busy agenda.
Yeah, we're gonna have lunch and dinner?
Dinner works.
Any questions that are for Victoria on the agenda? We'll try to take another look at it and make sure that we can do it in the time allotted, because it's going to be tough, but a lot of things going on. Okay.
Item 4B.
Can I just ask, I guess, in that meeting, since it's so long, can we move the things that actually need to be adopted to the beginning and then the discussion and information to the end of the meetings?
We can follow that guideline.
Sure. You know, I'd like to hear it all, but I want to make sure we act on what we need to act on.
I can't leave because it's closed session.
Okay, 4B.
4B, which is the June 8th draft board policy agenda. Item number 1 is your public comments, communication member comments. Under chair's report, we expect to bring the plan of excellence implementation. This is for discussion. Melissa Kaufelt will be joined by 4 of our directors to discuss the implementation of the plan of excellence. Under reports, we have item number 3, which is the Sandag Audit Committee membership, and we're seeking an approval for that. And item number 4 is the San Diego Forward Regional Transportation Plan Development Transportation Networks Draft Transportation Scenarios. So this is where we'll go and seek input on the 3 transportation funding scenarios. And then we would also like to add to this agenda an item related to the regional growth forecast assumptions, and we would be seeking an approval.
Any comments regarding the agendas? Serge.
I know I run the borders meeting and my own city council meetings. I really focus on consultants and visiting bureaucrats who love to go on and in our own staff about being a lot more concise. And I think that's something when we have 25 things on the council meeting, that to really get the staff and us all visiting people to really focus on getting to the point and being a lot more concise and getting us information we need. I think there's a tendency to go on and on and on, and yeah, I think we just need to get things to focus on anymore. No editorial. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I propose a limit of no more than 15 PowerPoint slides? If you can't say it in less than 15, you get a problem.
Okay. Good guidance, and we'll.
And Sam can't talk.
Yes. Okay, could we have approval of those proposed agendas?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Horn and Mr. Morrison. Further discussion, if you would, please vote. Voting is closed. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 5 is the proposed final fiscal year 2019 program budget. We have Andre and Sandy. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So today we are here to present a review of the proposed final program budget for fiscal year 2019. In the draft budget presentations in March, we reviewed the expected funding status, highlighted expected fiscal year 2018 accomplishments, and summarized staffing, compensation, and employee benefit programs. Today's focus will be on the changes from the draft to the final. Now, the proposed 2019 program budget totals $1.3 billion, which includes $916 million in projected spending on the capital program for next year, which is mostly the Transit Early Action Program, $43.5 million for the planning program, which is the overall work program, or OWP, and $67.6 million for the regional operations. I'll now turn it over to Sandy, who will discuss the changes between the draft and final.
Thanks, Andre. The proposed changes since the March draft are shown in the agenda report on page 3 of your report, or 53 of your tablets. Overall, the budget increased $2 million, or 0.2% from draft to final. This is primarily in the capital program, as I will mention. Starting with changes to the planning or OWP budget, the budget is decreasing $511,000 due to staff time allocations and 2, to applying the use of contingency for the new independent performance auditor. The operations final proposed budget has an increase of $162,000, primarily from a proposed new position for Division Director of Toll Operations that would provide management of operations for the SR 125 and I-15 tolling facilities. Changes to the capital budget since March include a slight increase in fiscal year 2019 spending, along with an increase to the multi-year capital budget funding. An increase of $3.4 million from the City of San Diego is being added to the Elvira to Marina double track for sewer and water utilities. This addition was approved by the board at its March 23rd meeting as an amendment to the current fiscal year 18 budget. A new project, UCSD Midcoast Improvements, is funded with $3 million from UCSD and was approved by the Executive Committee at its April 13th meeting. Several regional high-priority rail projects along the Lausanne corridor were awarded $18.9 million in SB1 formula funds. It has been added to the budget with matching local transit dollars. So overall, as noted in the table on page 2 of the agenda, or 52 of your tablets, these and other proposed changes will increase the fiscal year 2019 spending by $2 million and increase the overall multi-year capital program budget by $44 million to a total of $8.9 billion. When the board approved the draft budget in March, there was also a request that consideration be given to establishing a set-aside for environmental and design work in the annual budget. The Transportation Committee discussed this idea at its April meeting and determined that while the region is already working on the environmental and design phase for many projects across the region, the opportunity to add even more should wait until later this year when we know what the fate of SB1 will be. The budget currently includes about $28 million of SB1 funds. However, only about $9 million of this is budgeted for fiscal year 19, meaning while we are proposing to include all of the SB1 funds that we have awarded in the multi-year budget, the majority of these funds are programmed in future years, which will allow for the outcome of SB1 to be known before the dollars are actually spent. The funding that is proposed to be included for this fiscal year would be covered by SB1 dollars that will have been collected before the November vote. As noted, if SB1 is not repealed, additional funding could be added to the budget to advance the start of work for other regional priorities, including the Blue Line Trolley, various freeway interchanges, I-15, State Route 52, State Route 78, and the I-805 corridors. Now back to Andre.
I'm sorry, did you say that SB1 dollars were going to be arriving before the November election? So dollars, I know we're programming them. Are they actually showing up before the November election?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I missed that. Thank you.
So while we're balancing the OWP for fiscal year 19, we're also looking back at fiscal year 8, and we identified $635,000 in additional savings. So staff is looking to the executive committee for direction of potential uses for this money. There's 3 potential things that we could do: is expand existing OWP or start a new planning process, add funds to the Section 115 trust. Just a reminder, there is $1 million in the budget already this year for fiscal year 2019. Or we could add monies to the contingency fund reserve. Currently, we're at 14% of the OWP, which is $6.14 million. And as a reminder, our board policy 30 says that we should have at least 10% of contingency funds. So we're at 14% or 4% above that. Now this year, with the focus on the 2019 regional plan, which is fully funded, we are suggesting, or the staff is recommending, potentially putting the money into the Section 115 trust or into the contingency reserve, or maybe splitting the difference between the two. Lastly, the only changes to the staffing plan, pay for performance and employee benefit proposals, are the 2 new positions that Sandy mentioned earlier. So today, the Executive Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve resolution number RTC 2018-04, attachment 1, adopting the proposed final 2019 program budget in substantially the same form as shown in attachment 3. With that, we welcome your questions.
So we've been naturally discussing the SB1 issues as to what funding we use and how we approach it because of the election in November. There are the 2 staffing increases that have been approved, and that's reflected in the budget. And plus, as Andre said, we need to give guidance as to what we proposed to the board regarding this $600,000 money that we could either put in a contingency or into a pension or whatever our recommendation is. So those are the kind of the highlights, I think. Discussion and questions of Andre. Sam?
Can you clarify again the section 115 options?
Sure. So initially the board, we established a fund back in 2017. We put in $3.5 million. $3 million of it was from contingency, $500,000 was from the budget. Last year we augmented that with another $1 million. And this year in the budget we're currently have $1 million budgeted right now. So the balance in the fund right now is approximately $4.7 million. With 2019 it will be $5.7 million, and obviously there's some interest earnings to that. So I know that the last time we were at the executive committee, it suggested potentially augmenting if we had additional funds. Typically what we do when we have additional funds, we drop them into the contingency fund, but since the last executive committee, you mentioned potentially augmenting the Section 115 trust. We haven't dropped it into contingency yet, and we're looking for direction if you'd like to do that.
Again, this is very important to me because the liability is just getting unbelievable or unmanaged, and I know that we have dropped down from 70% to 64% because of the increased liability. Liability is going to grow; it's not going to go down. I can assure you that, and our projection is going from 18% of the budget general fund to 28% the next several years. This is concerning to me. I understand this year the additional expense on several things, the ABA 05 implementation and other things, and I discussed that with Kim. I understand it, but we need to put as much as we can. Escondido had a good, successful model, and then Sandak followed that and created the Section 115, so Escondido now is following the successful model of Sandak, and we need to put as much money in that to make sure our unfunded liability does not grow to a level that we cannot manage it.
Other comments?
I guess as far as putting money into the 115, I think it sounds like a good idea, but do we have like a goal that we're trying to reach or a number we're trying to reach other than we just throw money on this pile? Do we want to get to half of our unfunded liability? Do we want to get to 20% of our unfunded? I'm just curious is we don't really have set any guidelines for ourselves as to how much we're going to put into 115. I don't mind putting more in, but I'd like to know what are we shooting for here? If we want to stay 80% funded, 70% funded, and what's that look like for the 115 fund? I think we have to have a deeper discussion as to
The goal when you guys talked about it initially was really to get to a full funding level, and I forget it was 10 years or 12 years, 15 years?
Yeah, so the idea is that the amortization that we have from PROS is over 30 years, but our goal is to try to cut that by half to maybe 15 years. And so when we had the actuarial study done, they said if you put in an additional $1 million per year, you could reach that goal. And by reaching that goal, we could potentially save $29 million over that 30-year period. If we made these, it's basically like prepaying.
If we make this $1 million every year.
Right.
Okay.
And so obviously the more money we put in there, and hopefully if the markets cooperate and give us good returns, the quicker we can achieve that goal.
So, and what is that total number in the millions? I guess we got almost $4.5 million in there right now. So is that over 15 million? Is that the
Well, it would be more than that because we're expecting to
achieve. It's okay.
We're expecting to achieve approximately 7% in return per year. So 15 million would be the principal, but it's more in the 20 million figure that we're hoping to basically amortize and pay off the unfunded liability.
Well, that's better information. I didn't realize we had like a $15 million principal goal. Okay.
Supervisor Roberts.
Yeah, let me ask a question because you're really not paying down anything. What you're doing is establishing a contingency fund. The contingency fund could be spent on anything any future board wants to spend it on. You haven't really accomplished what you ought to be doing. It's a fair way to actually get this in and reduce that. And instead of waiting 15 years to do it, reduce it. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but I'd rather see it committed. At the county, we pay ours down. We don't establish a fund. we actually reduce it, period. If we want to put an extra 25 million or whatever that number is, we'll put it and reduce it. 4 years from now, this money could be spent on free bus passes or whatever a board would decide, and you might not be in any better shape than you are today. And that concerns me, because I think you're all laboring under a false assumption that you establish some type of lockbox.
Supervisor, if I could respond to that. So we do have a contingency fund, which is up to the board's pleasure to put money in and out of there. The Section 115 trust is irrevocable. It can only go to pay down your PERS liability.
Okay.
And so the idea that we set that up a few years ago was exactly for that reason, that the funds that we put in there cannot be taken out. The only time they can be taken out is to write a check to PERS to reduce our liability.
So a future board can't decide we want to change this agreement?
That's correct. They cannot change the agreement. Once.
How does that happen?
Yeah, so there's only, as of the time that we went, there was only 2 agencies in the state of California who had got a letter determination from the IRS setting up a Section 115 trust, which said that any monies that go in that trust cannot come out except for the purpose of what you're sitting at. Correct.
I feel better about it.
And there is, I think one of the motivations that a lot of cities are looking at for this trust is the fact that we cannot get very good information accounting from CalPERS. It changes every day, and it's hard to account for your own liabilities. And this approach makes sure that the money that we're setting aside is actually going to be available for its use. So
Is it required that this be used only after your minimum payment's been made?
You can put the.
Could I reduce my payment in any given year and use money out of it? Okay, so you haven't achieved what you said you've achieved.
Well, I guess just to reiterate your question, we can put the money into PERS at any time we want, but our goal when we established our particular.
I understand that, but again, you don't. Subsequent boards can say, okay, we're not gonna make payments on our pension. This year, we're gonna take the money out of there.
Only so that it goes towards your liability. That's the only place.
I understand that, but
Okay.
it can go in lieu of making the minimum payment.
No.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. I think the decision that you guys had.
It's a weak trust, if that's the case.
Okay.
I need to follow up with that. Our actuary consultant for 2 hours said you need to be 100% funded. This is the goal, and I understand that the more 3 benefits from the Section 115. One is you get 5% return on investment versus 2.5% of your cash flow you put in investment. Second, you can either use it to reduce the long-term liability, or you can use it for the annual payment as well. And that gives you flexibility if the general fund needs that section. But the Section 115 restricts this fund for only the pension liability for annual payment. So, Supervisor Ross, yes, it is only restricted to pension. You cannot use it for any other things. The only option we have as a board or future board is you want to pay down the long-term liability to 100% or use it for annual payment, which would reduce your annual payment. I think this is the best option to address the pension.
Other comments? What is the recommendation?
I guess I would recommend the fact that we have 14% currently in the contingency reserve, the fact that we only, we're supposed to have at least 10%. And whatever we have in the contingency fund right now is, earning maybe 1-2%, whereas hopefully if we put it towards the Section 115 trust, we can earn higher amounts. So the recommendation would be to put it towards the trust.
And I can support the staff recommendation. I cannot vote, but I would support the staff. I think it's a good recommendation.
Okay. Is there other comments or any motion?
Move we support staff recommendation.
There's a motion to.
Second.
And a second for Mr. Minto to support the staff recommendation. Is there further discussion?
Just a question on the 195 million that I guess we got granted from CTC for the Midcoast and the I-5. That 195 million is kind of on hold right now until the election. Between now and the election, though, I think we've got the opportunities. If SB1, whatever, if it stays in place, then I'd hate to wait until November to figure out what we're going to do with those dollars. So I think it'd be nice to start prioritizing or looking at what those dollars might be spent for. I mean, just at least some preliminary work instead of just waiting for the election.
I don't know if this is correct, because I think this year's funding is guaranteed from SB1. I think we have to worry about next year's.
Well, I think,
Okay.
yeah, what you're saying is start planning for the use if SB1 stays in place.
Well, we're already spending some of
Stuff
those
is-
dollars and some other things, but we did get 195 million apparently from CTC for Midcoast. Is that
Where we
right?
are is staff, CTC staff has recommended a number of things, funding. For North Coast Corridor, there's 195 million that's being recommended from what's called the Solutions for Contested Corridor funding pot, right? And so we do intend, so CTC's meeting next week, we will know if the commission actually approves it.
Okay.
And then we do plan on bringing a budget amendment, but the question is whether or not we put in the budget, whether or not we actually proceed with, have Caltrans proceed with awarding kind of a next phase of a construction contract. Because it's still unclear on the dollars and what's at risk. I think the monies you guys have received as local governments for street and roads, that's already been collected, and so you guys are putting that into your budget and using it for the
Okay.
local street and roads.
All right.
Some of the money that Sandy and Andre talked about in the budget, we have some SB1 planning dollars, some small dollars for freeway service patrol. Similar to like your local street and roads, it's already been collected, and so there's no clawback or there's no risk there. But some of these other ones,
Okay.
these bigger pots, it's still unclear. So for example, the Citricado is still unclear, the 12.5 million, whether or not, what's going to happen. I think we've heard from CTC that they intend to sort of try to keep the promises if SB1 goes away, but
It's still uncertain.
It's still uncertain, right?
Okay.
With what monies and at what time frame? I think it would be to stretch the time frame out if the repeal occurs, so.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Further comments? Motion on the table to accept the staff recommendation. Please vote. Voting is closed, and that passes. Thank you very much. Item number 6 is our legislative status report, and Victoria and Robin.
Okay. So I would like to provide a brief update on the federal grants. Since you last met, NCTD was awarded $1.2 million to purchase zero-emission battery electric buses from the FTA through the Bus and Bus Facilities Program. To give you an overview of the competition, FTA received applications for 453 eligible projects totaling approximately $2 billion. NCTD was one of 12 projects selected in California. Moving on to new grant opportunities, as part of the FY18 budget, the Federal Transit Administration has announced the availability of approximately $85 million in FY18 funds for the low or no emission program. The funds would go to support transition to the lowest polluting, most energy efficient vehicles. Applications are due in June, and both NCTD and MTS are expected to apply for electric buses and charging infrastructure. Also, USDOT has announced the availability of grant funding through the Advanced Transportation Congestion Management Technologies deployment. Basically, this is competitive grants to advance technologies to improve safety, efficiency, systems performance, and infrastructure return on investment. SANDAG would like to submit one application that would integrate nearly a dozen regional transportation management systems into one unified platform to reduce congestion, safety, and create opportunities for community and transportation enhancements across all modes in all corridors in the county. The project was submitted as part of an SB1 application, but was not selected on those solutions for congestion corridors. So as such, applications are due June 1, and we'd like to submit this for federal consideration. And then last but not least, I've been keeping the committee apprised on the Tiger grants, or as they're better known as now, the Better Utilized Investments to Leverage Development, the BUILD grants. The department has announced the availability of $1.5 billion. The first time in this iteration is that there is $15 million available for planning grants. Previous Tiger rounds have not included funding for plans. Applications are due on July 19th, and given that this is an election year, results of the competition are expected to be announced before the November elections. And so I'll be bringing back, using the SB1 list of projects that are ready to go and ready for to compete for funding, back, some ideas of what we would like to support, to propose to the USDOT to fund in this program.
Questions for Victoria?
Does that planning include EIR dollars or just project plans themselves?
It's EIR dollars, but it's $15 million nationally, and so the thought process is that this would be $1 to $2 million potentially that you would need to finish up your environmental document, and then you would need to also be able to demonstrate that you would be able to fund construction relatively soon after the completion of the EIR document.
Okay,
So it's
15
really
million national.
15 million nationally.
Yours is 35 million.
Okay, Robin.
Just for the EIR.
All right, on the state front, good news on our bill, Senate Bill 1151, which is our neighborhood electric vehicle bill. It passed unanimously out of the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee a couple of weeks ago. It's set for its next hearing by the Senate Appropriations Committee this coming Monday, May 14th. So we continue to hope that it will receive widespread bipartisan support and move through the process. It has until June 1st to pass out of the Senate, and then it'll move over to the Assembly to start its process over there. We'll continue to keep you updated on that. Also happening soon, in fact in 29 minutes, the governor will be releasing his May revise. So just as a reminder, every January the governor releases his proposed budget. So it was for FY 18-19. And then in May he releases a May revise that includes the latest revenues and projections. So that will be happening later this morning. Just as a reminder, in January the proposal includes about $190 billion of spending that would have fully funded the rainy day fund, and included about $8 billion for local governments to support realignment efforts. It also had $1.25 billion for cap and trade funding programs, which SANDAG typically does very well under, as well as provisions to support the $258 million or so that it is expected to be available for housing programs pending the results of the housing bond that will be on the November ballot. And finally, about $4.6 billion for SB1 funded programs. So Kim already kind of gave you the news about the announcements that happened a couple of weeks ago for 3 of the major SB1 new grant programs. CTC staff released their recommendations, and the region is slated to receive about $312 million as a whole. That includes the $195 million for the North Coast Corridor program, $82.5 million for our California-Mexico border system project. This is something that we partnered with Caltrans, the Imperial County Transportation Commission on, and includes kind of the final piece of the network that we'll need to support our future Otay Mesa East port of entry, as well as some new ITS elements all across the border that also include 15 new air monitors to support some of our local air pollution quality monitoring efforts that a nonprofit like Casa Familiar is doing right now. We also are slated to receive $12.5 million for the Serrano to Miramar double track project, which is great news for the LOSAM project. And then the City of East Escondido has about $12.5 million for their Citricado Parkway. City of San Diego, $6 million for some of your local truck routes up along the border. And the port's getting about $6.5 million for some of their port improvements. So great news for the region. The CTC is scheduled to meet here in San Diego next week. And once that's been approved, we can start to move forward on some of those budget amendments that were mentioned earlier. In other good news, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program announcements also were made. This is a program that's run by the California State Transportation Agency. It previously was primarily a cap and trade program. Now it's also receiving a major infusion of about $300 million in SB1 funds per year. Those announcements were made, and the region as a whole was awarded $86 million. So that includes about $40 million that SANDAG, LoSAN, and NCTV partnered on for a LoSAN corridor-wide application, another $40 million for MTS for Blue Line Trolley Enhancement Project, and then SANDAG individually submitted an application to support upgrades to 19 of our transit stations along University Avenue, and we're getting almost $6 million for those efforts. So good news on the funding awards, and we worked very closely with all of you, as you know, in the fall to put these applications together, partnered with a lot of our stakeholders, and I think we're seeing the fruits of all of that. And that's all I have for this date.
Thank you very much. Really good news, and I think, aren't we doing some news press release kind of information coming up?
There is a SB1 press conference, I believe it's scheduled for next Friday.
Questions for Victoria or Robin on this report?
Yeah, let's see if we get the money.
Okay, that was for information. Thank you very much. No other public comments, I don't believe. Our next meeting is June 8th at 9 a.m. And we're adjourning early.
No way.